As idle as a painted ship upon a painted ocean. Water, water everywhere, and all the boats that shrink. Water, water everywhere, nor any drop to drink. So, the difficult time comes again, the hard time comes again. And by now, the crew and the mariner realize that it had nothing to do with the killing of Albatross, and the initial feeling of the guilt returns in the form of some punishment. So the water is not around, and they are feeling very very thirsty. They don't have uh, any kind of feeling that can bring some kind of relief for these people. Ah, well a day, what evil looks had I from old and young. Instead of the cross, the albatross about my neck was hung. So, if the crime has been committed, the punishment has to be there. And the punishment comes here in the form of the same albatross which has been killed by mariner is hung on the neck of the mariner in place of cross. And that symbolizes some kind of guilt which is already there, which will remain there until and unless he pays a proper penance for the same. So, from then onwards, there is a kind of proverb that it's a kind of albatross in my neck. From this very incident, this proverb comes into vogue, which suggests that there is a guilt, and this guilt has to be worn all the time to make one's realize about one's own sin. So the punishment of the crime occurs, but this is just a beginning, the beginning of the suffering, because as per the Christian theology, if there is a sin, there has to be a suffering, and through suffering only redemption can take place. So the poem talks about sin, suffering, and redemption at length. So sin has been committed, so suffering will definitely follow, and they keep suffering. There are a lot of incidents which suggest that their suffering is going to be very very of high paramount. A ghost ship approaches with a spectre woman and her death mate as crew. So this is something symbolic here also. When these people were suffering, they didn't have water, they didn't have food to eat, and they were just trying to survive without all these materials. And at the same time, something appears, and this is a ghostly ship which is appearing from nowhere and going to nowhere, but it is symbolizing their own crime, and they are the mirror of their criminal activities, because now mariner is not the only culprit. The it is, this scene is shared between crew and mariner. The mariner has to suffer. Along with mariner, the ship is also, the crew is also going to suffer. So the problem is, it's a kind of cosmic justice again, I should tell, because it is always the case that the even before the evil, the supporter of evil suffers. Something happens in Macbeth also, where Banquo justifies the action of Macbeth, and he himself has to die first of all, who becomes the object of Macbeth's not vengeance, but his subtler plan, which are going to become more and more powerful, and Banquo can come on the way. So Banquo is killed. So there is one thing, that he justified the action of Macbeth, and he has to suffer for the same. But here also you see the crew justified the action of the mariner, and they will have to suffer like anything. So this is the beginning. The ghostly ship appears, spectre women are there, the deathmate are there, and they show them a kind of picture whatever they have done in past. This suffering increases with the time. They see somewhere that the death, there are two voices coming in the way, And these are the of death and life in death. Even they are symbolic representation of what kind of life these people were going to face. So death was one woman and the other voice was life in death, and they were rolling dice for the lives of the ship's crew. Means they were playing a kind of dice game where who is going to win, and accordingly a proper appropriate punishment will be given to them. Life in death wins, because death is a very easier sort of punishment. If you die, then you are free from all kind of sins, you are free from all kind of suffering, and you are definitely going to escape all this plight. But life in death is something which death remains persistently there, but in the form of life. That means suffering, suffering, and suffering. A more level of suffering, and until and unless penance is given, this suffering will continue to exist. So, life and death wins. The fall of the crew is very important in the context, because, as I told earlier, the one who supports evil meets its end first of all, meets its share first of all, and that happens with the crew. One after one by the star-dodged moon, too quick for groan or sigh, each turned his face with a ghastly pang and cursed me with his eye. So you see that everybody started falling down and they were going to meet their death. 4 times 50 living men, and I heard nor sigh nor groan. With heavy thump, a lifeless lump, they dropped down one by one. So this is how the crew falls and they meet their proper share of the sin. But mariner is a sinner, is the main sinner, and therefore he has to suffer more than the crew who just justified the cause of the action. So mariner's suffering will be more than the suffering of the crew, and this is justified here when he quotes, an orphan's curse would drag to hell a spirit from on high, but oh, more horrible than that is the curse in a dead man's eye. 7 days, 7 nights I saw that curse, and yet I could not die. So you see that this suffering was very, very appropriate. You have the curse in the dead man's eyes is so powerful that there is no chance of escape of any such things. Now the suffering keeps increasing. He is not able to find any kind of feeling that he can be released of his crime. But then something happens, and it was so natural, which even was not thought by mariner himself. O happy living things, no tongue their beauty might declare. A spring of love gushed from my heart, and I blessed them unaware. Sure, my kind saint took pity on me, and I blessed them unaware. The selfsame moment I could pray, and from my neck so free, the albatross fell off and sank like lead into the sea. The release of the crime takes place only when mariner is able to love the creatures. Mariner is not a kind of person, because we know already he kills an innocent albatross for no reason, just because his hatred for other non-living or non-human entities. And this was the hatred that led him to a kind of sin. But now, through suffering, he realized that these creatures, which are he actually comes across some snakes that were just there in the sea. He could appreciate the beauty of these water creatures, and when he was understanding, he was appreciating the beauty, somewhere he had a very loving feelings for these creatures, something which he used to hate earlier, but this time it transformed into an eternal love, and out of love he could manage praying for these people. He said that God bless them, and the moment he prayed, the albatross which was there in the neck fell off and sank like lead into the sea. So that was symbolizing the release of the curse which had already befallen on him. So only through love, through prayer, he could understand that some kind of pray is required to prevent this kind of curse. So when the curse is lifted, he directs his ghostly ship to the north. When he returns to the home port, the spirits of his crew leave their bodies. So these things happen that when he was returning, one by one, the bodies, the spirits of those the dead bodies, gradually they start leaving those bodies, and now they became just a corpses, nothing else. Earlier they used to be the ghosts only with the staring eyes, and it was a kind of very very scary feeling if there are corpses around you and they are staring at you. The supernatural entity is very well interwoven here. So as soon as he reaches the shore, there is a hermit, and the hermit gives him forgiveness for whatever crime he has committed. And when he comes on the shore, he finds that the sheep of this mariner is it sinks, and all these events that happen once he reaches the shore symbolize that redemption and the salvation has taken place. Now the question still persists why Mariner stopped the wedding guest and why he told all his tale. But the essence of all these things come here. Mariner's curse is not lifted completely. It is still there, but in the form of some sort of agony. And this agony will always remain with him. This agony has something to do with his spreading the message across. So he has to live with this kind of suffering, or with this kind of sharing of an idea that whomsoever he will meet, he will have to share his own grief, his own story. Otherwise he cannot take rest. So he says, farewell, farewell, but this I tell to thee, thou wedding guest. He prayeth well who loveth well, both man and bird and beast. So here comes the moral of the story, that only that person has a capacity to pray, the one who can love. If one cannot love, the beast or the creatures or the human being cannot pray for them. And if he cannot pray, then there is no chance of salvation. It is very much in alignment with the Christian theology also. He prayeth best who loveth best, all things both great and small, for the dear God who loveth us, he made and loveth all. Because what he means to say that we are all created by God, whether human beings or the beasts or the slimy creatures, but they are all created by God. And if you can't love them, then you can't love the God also, and in turn God is not going to love you. So as soon as the story is over, the wedding guest has undergone a massive change now. He went like one that has been stunned and is of sense forlorn, a sadder and a wiser man. He rose the morrow morn. The wedding guest is no longer the same as he used to be earlier. There is a drastic, phenomenal change in his entire attitude. He leaves the place with a sadder and wiser man. Wiser because he knows this truth, the eternal truth which is conveyed to him by this ghostly mariner, and he is sadder because now he has understood life is not all about merrymaking but beyond that. So this is how the story is over, the wedding guest has left. The narrative structure as far as is concerned is divided into 7 parts. Most of the stanzas in the poem have 4 lines. Several have 5 or 6 lines. In the 4-line stanzas, the second and fourth lines usually rhyme, like the sun now rose upon the right, out of the sea came he, still hid in the mist, and on the left went down in the sea. The themes in the poem, as I have already discussed all of the themes, just I am mentioning how they keep coming in through the tales of Coleridge: sin, suffering, and redemption. There is a Christian allegory which also I mentioned, penance and forgiveness, harmony between nature and humanity. Because when the love returns for mariner, he is able to get away with the sin, with the crime. And again, there is a comment on the science versus spirituality debate also. And divine intervention is always there because this is the medieval theme. And I can say summingly that poetry gives most pleasure when most only generally and not perfectly understood. This was the opinion of Coleridge. Many critics maintain, as Christopher Lamb does, that the Ancient Mariner is a work of complete and pure imagination. So, the concludingly, I can say that this is something which is full of interpretations. We can make it according to our own choice, but the moral is same. He loveth well, he prayeth well, who loveth well. Therefore, thus the story comes to an end, and Coleridge, one of the greatest works, comes to its full accomplishment. Thank you.
Sandhan, All Gujarat Integrated Classroom.
સેટેલાઇટના માધ્યમથી જોડતી કડી એટલે સંધાન.